The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Clee Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. It's Live Music Friday, and later we'll hear the loud sounds of introverts with power trio True Jackie. They're playing at JJ's in Florence Saturday night.
And we'll once again wine Thunderdome with a winemaker. We'll make Patrick Capiello choose between two of his Monte Rio wines as we taste at Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions in Lenox.
But first, we're bringing the National to National Poetry Month.
Yeah, I don't know how to shut it off either. I mean, I didn't know that.
Oh, hi.
Oh my God, it's Ada Limon.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Are you willing to read a couple poems?
Yes, absolutely. Do I need to bring them up? Let's see. Which poems, and I'll get them ready.
Definitely In Praise of Mystery, just because it's going to be kind of the main crux of what I think the focus will be, apart from you being in Smith. And then...
Just make sure I have it somewhere.
And then...
Oh, I do.
It's on the Clipper, Europa Clipper plaque.
So I like to read it from this particular broadside, so hold on one second.
Okay, good. Are you going to read it from that handwritten tantalum metal plate from the Europa Clipper? You don't have that one with you?
When I was hanging out with the folks from NASA at South by Southwest, we all went to a happy hour afterwards, and they just had the vault plate with them. And I don't know about you, but I was so nervous, and I kept being like, you're not going to leave that here, right?
This Tuesday, April 30th, the Boutel Day Poetry Center, a part of Smith College, is welcoming to Northampton Ada Limon, the current Poet Laureate of the United States of America.
As the 24th Poet Laureate of the United States, her signature project is called You Are Here, which focuses on how poetry can help connect us to the natural world. It's an anthology of poems by 52 poets to be displayed in national parks like our own Cape Cod National Seashore.
She's also worked with NASA to write a poem called In Praise of Mystery to celebrate the launch of the Europa Clipper mission. The poem is engraved on the Europa Clipper in Ada Limon's handwriting.
She will serve as Poet Laureate until the spring of 2025. In October of last year, Ada Limon was awarded a MacArthur Fellowship, making her officially a genius.
Thank you for joining us, Ada Limon. We are also welcoming to this conversation the person who tipped me off to your coming to Smith College, and that is our resident astronomer, Hampshire College astronomer, Dr. Salman Hamid, the Carl Sagan of Pakistan, with his Kainat Studios, introducing the world of astronomy to the folks in Pakistan in Urdu. Ada Limon, maybe the best place to start is to have you read In Praise of Mystery, and then we'll launch into why you were doing this for the Europa launch.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this is the poem that I wrote for the Europa Clipper, which will launch to the second moon of Jupiter on October 10th. That's the launch window anyway. As we know, those things can be dependent on weather. It took me quite a while to write this poem, and now I've gotten to see it as it was engraved on the vault plate that is in my own handwriting, which is another wild experience. So
hopefully your handwriting is neat so that aliens will be able to read it.
As long as it took me to write the actual poem, getting my handwriting to where I liked it enough to send it to NASA was very difficult. If you can imagine writing a note or a card and getting something wrong or thinking, oh, that's just illegible. That's what happened to me. And so over and over and over again, I had to write this poem. It was quite an interesting practice in getting to know your own poem. Okay. In Praise of Mystery, a poem for Europa. Arching under the night sky, inky with black expansiveness, we point to the planets we know. We pin quick wishes on stars. From Earth we read the sky as if it is an unerring book of the universe, expert and evident. Still there are mysteries below our sky. The whale song, the songbird singing its call in the bough of a wind-shaken tree. We are creatures of constant awe, curious at beauty, at leaf and blossom, at grief and pleasure, sun and shadow. And it is not darkness that unites us, not the cold distance of space, but the offering of water, each drop of rain, each rivulet, each pulse, each vein. O second moon, we too are made of water, of vast and beckoning seas. We too are made of wonders, of great and ordinary loves, of small invisible worlds, of a need to call out through the dark.
That is the current poet laureate of the United States, Ada Limon, reading the poem that she wrote for NASA in praise of mystery to celebrate the launch of the Europa Clipper, which is hard for a Boston accent person to say, Europa Clipper. We've also got Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hamid with us. Maybe it will explain a little bit more about why this is important and how much water factors into Ada Limon's poem. If you explain to us what Europa is and why it's important to NASA.
Thank you very much. And that was just amazing, especially, we are creatures of constant awe. I think that is just, for astronomers in particular, that just connects so well. So within that context, why there is a mission going to Europa? Europa is perhaps the most interesting place in the solar system other than the Earth. Europa is important because we have definite evidence that there is liquid water ocean underneath the ice sheets of this moon of Jupiter. We also know actually that the ocean is salty. And so what is underneath there? We don't know. We don't know if there can be life there or not, but it certainly is a place where the likelihood of potential life is pretty good. This particular mission that is going on in October, it's going to not go into the ocean, but it's still going to orbit, and it's going to map out the terrain. It's going to try to figure out how deep ice sheet goes. It may try to find out what kind of organic molecules there are. Maybe we can find indirect evidence for life, but we will need patience because Jupiter is far away. It's going to get there in April of 2030.
Whoa.
But hey, it takes time. It's going to go about 1.8 billion miles journey. And this poem will be part of that, along with, if I read it correctly, about 2.6 million people added their names to it, which is on a microchip. That is also going to be part of this Europa Clipper mission.
It's a new concept of a message in a bottle, which is pretty amazing that it's going to go all the way to the second moon of Jupiter. And that is Salman Hamid, a familiar voice on the show. And we're
a little bit easier than a gold record.
I think
what we
so,
said
yeah.
the
How
last
are they
time.
going to play the Voyager gold record? I don't know, but you need a gold record player. And we're also joined by the Poet Laureate of the United States, Ada Limon, who will be at Smith College this Tuesday. There will be a private event for the students there, but not just Smith students, Hampshire, Hamden, Franklin County students from all over, high schools and more coming to the first event. And then a public event in the evening. Is writing poems for NASA part of the responsibility of the U.S. Poet Laureate?
Thank you for asking. I was actually at the Library of Congress when we got the request. It's not necessarily a responsibility, but working with different federal agencies has been something that surprisingly, I found quite a bit of joy working with NASA, working with the National Park Service, and working with the folks and all the scientists that worked on the National Climate Assessment has been really remarkable. Those are those sort of the three partners that I've had in terms of federal agency crossover. But working with NASA, they immediately talked about the importance of the Europa Clipper. When they asked me if I would do it, I immediately said yes. And then I panicked because then I had to write the poem. Honestly, a lot of my poems are quite personal. Sometimes I don't use the word we because I think, who is we including? Even if we think of we the people, who are we including? All these things. And I realized quite early on in the drafts that this was going to have to be a we poem because it was not just for those of us in the United States, but a global effort. And really not just for human beings, but all of us that share this planet.
If I can ask a question, in terms of writing the poem, you have another collection from other poets that is coming out. And in the introduction, you say that because nature is not a place to visit, but nature is who we are. And in that context, I'm just wondering, when you were thinking about Europa, how do you see the wonder in science and wonder in poetry?
Yeah, I think that they're all connected. And I also keep thinking people will separate nature on this planet and in space, but I think it's all nature. We're all part of it. This is, how we were made. We're stardust, all of these things I think are fascinating to me. And I think with poetry, we have a place where we can make room for wonder and we can also make room for questions. And I think about exploration in that same way. When you write a poem and it has a question in it and you interrogate it, whether it's your soul or your heart or, whatever it is that's driving you mad, as you go deeper into the poem, yes, you excavate some answers, but it only leads you to more questions. And I think that that is the same as scientists. Really, we answer one question and 1,000 more questions come into play. And I think artists are the same way, that we never think, oh, I've solved my life with this poem. Instead we think, oh, I've opened this door. Let's see how many more doors are coming.
This poem that is on the mission to Europa, I think poses two really interesting questions. In the poem itself, there is this interesting, I wouldn't necessarily say divide, but looking at the natural world from two aspects, one looking up and one looking around you and down. I feel like that second part leads into your project, You Are Here, which is going to be up in national parks. Did the National Park Service come to you to put poetry up, or were you wanted to do more poems about the natural world being a poet laureate?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love the way you dovetailed into the project because as poet laureate, the Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden, who I adore, asks really if you would do a signature project. And she really wants poets laureate to be of service. How can you help? How can you amplify poetry? And so I came up with a project. So You Are Here is the project that I first thought, okay, it will be something that relates to poetry and the natural world and how they're intertwined. As the Library of Congress, folks are so creative and wonderful and have lots of different connections. They were the ones who said, I think we can get the national parks on board. And so we invited them to be part of the project. And they have been a wonderful partner. We get to put iconic poems in 7 different national parks and then bring poetry and these really beautiful protected lands together.
Coming up, we'll hear another poem from the Poet Laureate of the United States, Ada Limon, who'll be at Smith on Tuesday, and we'll hear more about her National Parks project.
And later, Live Music Friday with True Jackie. We'll also hear about drinking more locally with the winemakers of Monte Rio Wines.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Ada Limon, who is the Poet Laureate of the United States of America, coming to Smith College this Tuesday. There's a public event on Tuesday evening talking about the relationship as the Poet Laureate with the national parks. And the anthology that you've collected with 52 poets is called You Are Here. Can you talk about what inspired you to call it You Are Here? I love that story.
Yeah. There's a couple different impulses for it, but I remember actually being on a hike at Raven Run here in just outside of Lexington, Kentucky, and thinking about how easy it is for the mind to wander. Even if you could be in the most beautiful space in the world, right? You could be in Hawaii, you could be under a waterfall or whatever it is, and find yourself tormented by your own mind or speeding up and thinking about, okay, when I get home, I have to do these things on my list, and then I will do this, and these things that happened to me in the past, I'm carrying them with me, etc. And so I was having that sort of moment as I was beginning my hike in Raven Run, and I looked at the map to see which direction I wanted to go. There's many different ways, and I looked at that little red dot, and it said, "You are here," and I thought, right, that is what I needed. And I thought that's the name of the project. And I also, I think about it in dovetailing with the NASA project that, the famous blue dot photo, which was, the picture of the Earth so small. And it said, we are here. And, they kind of connect in some ways to the sort of preciousness of this moment, of this life, of the urgency of our time. as well as that sense of expansiveness and connectivity that's all around us. That's how the title came to be.
There's a part of the You Are Here project that encourages people to write their own poems and either tag the project or send them in. Was that always going to be a part of this endeavor, to bring the public in and say, like, no, participate, not just in
Yes.
reading, but like in the making?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's many young people that have come up to me as I've toured. I've gone to many different places, many different colleges, high schools, all over, not just the United States, but globally. And a lot of young people will say that they didn't quite understand poetry until they tried to make it themselves. And they thought, oh, this is how it's made. And there are things that the poet knows that the reader will never know. And that's okay. That's part of this beautiful mystery of making things. That prompt and that request will be on all of the poetry installations that will be in the national parks.
In this endeavor to have people like engage more with the natural world and with your collection, I can't help but notice the diverse nature of the artists that you're grabbing work from. And I feel like, especially in the endeavors to get people out into the natural world, there is something to be said about putting brown bodies out in the natural world and having them interact. Is that an unintended side effect or an intentional thing to try and engage the people who aren't often encouraged to get out in nature, to really engage with the world and have them realize that it is also theirs?
The anthology itself is first and foremost full of some of the best writers writing today. Secondly, I think that I am very interested in a reclaiming of access and a reclaiming of the natural world, because I do think that as I was raised as a poet, and even my very first moments of figuring out what a nature poem was, it was often a white man going to a mountain and having an epiphany. And I wanted to see what would happen if we re envisioned not just the nature poem, but also what nature means to those of us who have a different relationship with not just the natural world itself, but borders, with countries, with nations. And it's one of the reasons it was really clear to me that as we put poems in the national parks, that we would have a native poet as one of our voices in the national parks. But I thought, of course, I wanted to make sure that we were also recognizing tribal lands. And I think that's really important when we look at, who has access to nature, who owns what. We think about protected spaces, but how do we think about who has not only the access, but the interest in going into a place that may or may not feel is theirs? I think there was a real intentional reclaiming when I put together this book.
And accessibility too. Like there's disabled poets and deaf poets in this anthology. It's really well. It's such a beautiful collection. It really
Thank
is.
you. When I got all of these poems and I printed them out and I laid them all on my kitchen table, I just sort of wept. I thought, look at what we've made.
Oh,
It's like making a forest.
This is going to be a weird esoteric question, and I apologize in advance, but...
Great. I love it already.
Do you think that collaborations bringing more humanities and writing like poetry into scientific projects like the Europa mission can also broaden the way that they think about those missions going about? Are we sending more poets into space? Are we sending more art into space? And how does that reframe what science you bring into your work also?
No, I love that, because I think that there's a real beauty to celebrating poetry in this way and to bringing the science and art worlds together. I think that there are many people that think of them as opposing. And that's always been shocking to me, because I think they're quite connected. I think that our sense of curiosity and our sense of trying to look deeply and pay attention are all connected. I work with environmental scientists quite a bit, and they will tell you that we are the lookers. They are the noticers. Poets are also the noticers. So I think scientists and artists have a great deal in common.
One of the connections that you referred to, and Khalees is in your question and Ada in your response, and we have already mentioned Pale Blue Dot and the Golden Record, which connects to Carl Sagan. But in the movie, contact when Jodie Foster, and so this is sort of like, statute of limitation is over. Like, she does go somewhere out in the middle of the galaxy. And there is a line in there where when she looks at the beauty, so she's like hardcore scientist, and she says, well, they should have sent a poet.
So
Like, when she sees them.
my favorite moment. I love that moment. We watched it, actually, my best friend and I, as I was getting ready to read the poem at the Library of Congress to NASA, to all of the Europa Clipper team was there, was really moving. And as we were getting ready, I was ironing my suit, and my best friend put that on, that little moment, so we could hear Jodie Foster saying they should have sent a poet.
No words to describe poetry. They should have sent a poet.
Ada Limon is the U.S. Poet Laureate currently. Before we have to let you go, can we hear one more poem?
Yes, absolutely. This is a good, I think, a spring poem. So I'll read this spring poem as it's April and the trees are just greening. Instructions on not giving up. More than the fuchsia funnels breaking out of the crab apple tree. More than the neighbor's almost obscene display of cherry limbs, shoving their cotton candy-colored blossoms to the slate sky of spring rains. It's the greening of the trees that really gets to me. When all the shock of white and taffy, the world's baubles and trinkets, leave the pavement strewn with the confetti of aftermath, the leaves come, patient, plodding, a green skin growing over whatever winter did to us, a return to the strange idea of continuous living, despite the mess of us, the hurt, the empty. Fine then, I'll take it, the tree seems to say, a new slick leaf unfurling like a fist to an open palm. I'll take it all.
I love that one.
So good.
That was on one of my request lists. If you didn't have them up, definitely perfect one.
Yay!
Ada Limon, the U.S. Poet Laureate of the United States. This is a great way to kind of put a nice bow on the nearing end of National Poetry Month. And you will be at Smith College this Tuesday talking with the students in the morning, but a public event that's free and open to the public on Tuesday evening at Smith.
The very last day of National Poetry Month.
There we go. And no better way to end it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation.
And Salman Hamid, we'll talk again about more specifically astronomical stuff on Monday.
Thank you so much.
We are stars.
Later in the show, Live Music Friday with True Jackie, who are playing JJ's Tavern in Florence tomorrow night.
And now we're off to the Berkshires, where winemaker Patrick Cappiello will be forced to choose between two of his own wines in the Wine Thunderdome at Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions in Lenox.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. I don't know if they told you, Patrick, but we do Wine Thunderdome, which means two wines enter, one wine leaves. We have to kind of vote on which one we like the best.
Yeah. So do I vote or no? I don't.
Oh yeah, you'll vote eventually.
I vote about which one of my wines should be taken down. All right, fine. I like this. More winemakers should be subjected to this. This is a good thing.
We were lucky to go check out the brand new Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions in Great Barrington down the road, Mary Dare, and that's a beautiful shop with beautiful signage painted by our Valley friend, Jeshmarsh Wishman, creator of The Maze at Mike's Maze in Sunderland, amongst other wonderful pieces of artwork. But now we're at your original store here in Lenox, and we're drinking with another winemaker.
Yes, we are so excited to welcome Patrick Cappiello to the Berkshires, to Dare today. Thanks for being here, Patrick. And thank you guys for coming back out to the Berkshires to see us.
Anytime!
Yeah, we love it. And we're also with our Valley wine friend from Charles River Wines, my Pinot Grigio wine nemesis.
Yes.
Cristiano got sour.
That's me.
Yeah.
I don't drink that much Pinot Grigio, no matter what Monty tells you.
I wrote a column for the Valley Advocate talking about how Pinot Grigio is the most boring grape.
I heard about this.
And then Chris wrote to me and was like, I'm going to prove
will never die.
I'm going to prove to you that Pinot Grigio is not the most boring grape. And I came around to say that there are, of course, good expressions of Pinot Grigio. But I still stand by my testament that if I were to say, writ large, what's the most boring grape, I still think it's Pinot Grigio.
I appreciate that you are so stubborn.
I follow a lot of like wine memes. One of them was like the famous Bruce Lee quote.
Be formless, shapeless, like water.
And there was a guy dressed up like grape saying, poof, I'm Pinot Grigio. So that's kind of my take on it. But you, Patrick, are a winemaker. Where are you making wine?
The winery that I make wine in is in Sebastopol in Sonoma County. But the vineyards that I make wine from tend to be in the Central Valley. It would be like making wine in Boston from vineyards in the Berkshires.
What is the name of your wine label?
My winery is called Monte Rio Cellars.
Oh, hey.
Hey, thanks.
I threw Monte in there.
I worked at a radio station called The River for 20 years. So
I love
Monte
it.
Rio is like perfect wine for me.
Mornings with Monty on the river.
My mind is blown.
Did I tell you at this point that I actually make Pinot Grigio as well?
People like what they like. Are you going to punk me? Because I see the bottles are in bags.
You never know.
One of them could be Pinot Grigio. Okay, well, tell us about what got you into the world of wine.
Well, my background is not in winemaking. I've been making wine now for 6 vintages. So 2024, which we're the year we're in now, will be my 7th vintage. Previous to that, I was a sommelier starting in the year 2001 when I moved to New York City, was my sommelier career started at Tribeca Grill. And I was a somm at a lot of great restaurants in New York, eventually opened my own restaurants that were heavily based on wine. And then after those restaurants sadly closed in 2017, I decided that I was going to utilize this opportunity at that point I was 45 and ready for the last chapter, ideally, of my working life. And decide.
You just made me feel wicked.
Well, at some point, I worked really hard for a really long time with the dream of opening a restaurant in New York City, and I did that. And then after it happened and I realized it wasn't all it was cracked up to be, and also broke my heart when it closed, I decided I wanted to look at the world from a different lens.
Besides the fact that, we're all glossing over the fact that you just dropped for the first name of the restaurant, Tribeca Grill. Sure, bury that lead.
He's super modest about it, which is one of my favorite things about him as a winemaker and a person.
The place where I make my wine, I should mention, is my best friend's winery, a guy named Pax Mele. And Pax has been making wine for about 25 years in Northern California. And in that facility are 4 other very interesting characters, including Pax, Martha Stuman, Carlo Mondavi, who's the grandson of Robert Mondavi, and then a young lady named Rosalind Reynolds. So imagine having stepped foot in some of the best vineyards in the world and met some of the most amazing winemakers in the world, and then to have 5 really different and amazing, well-interested and invested people in my life standing next to me when I had the opportunity to actually put grape to tank.
So what was the biggest kind of learning curve for you coming from being a sommelier to being the one who actually is making the wines that other sommeliers and folks are gonna taste?
Getting out of the way of the wine. I think that's the hardest thing to know, not letting your ego get in between what you think you know about wine and what actually is the truth. As wine professionals, we are often pitched this idea of the romantic way that wine is made and the mystical way that we bring the land to bottle, and all those things sound really great, but in the end, it's really a chemistry experiment, and if you're not very good at that, it goes bad really quickly.
You have become sort of a U.S. wine evangelist. Tell us why this is something that is important to you to be talking about out there.
The world of wine is having a moment where less people seem to be interested in something that was only building steam for the last many, many years in this country, and we're finally seeing a depression, people drinking less wine than they were. We don't need to send off the alarms. We're not all going to lose our jobs. What's happened during this moment of retraction, I've put out a call to people in this country in which we live to put a little bit more emphasis on consuming a little more locally within the country in which we live, to help support the small businesses within this country that we live. This is a good opportunity for us to look at this as a country, whether or not you love being from this country or not, and there are times where I definitely do not love being an American, but I think that but supporting your community, supporting people who have small businesses that contribute to ideally the social structure, I think that it's important at times to take a minute and look at it. No chef ever decides, even a French chef living in America, they would never say, I'm going to buy all my carrots only from the Loire Valley. Like this mentality of like wine is the exception of the one thing that we don't have to or we should never feel considerate about drinking local or what the actual damage of shipping it from all over the place is to the planet. And I know people are like, you're just saying this right now because you're a California winemaker and you're suffering. And for sure, I've seen a reduction in sales, but I do think it's a time period where we can take a moment and make a difference. So I've gone on a 60-day American wine diet, I'm calling it, where I'm only drinking American wine.
Well, let's taste your wines.
Okay, great.
Patrick, we're at Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions in Lenox with Patrick Cappiello, the winemaker behind Monte Rio. They are in paper bags, and Chris Scazzara from Charles River Wine is going to pour. Okay, the first wine is white, so could be the Pinot Grigio.
Be water, my friend.
If we get trolled this way, A, I blame you, and B, it will be the greatest thing that's happened to me.
This, though, smells like Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Well, how would I know? It's in a paper bag.
I like the acidic structure, so if this is a Pinot Grigio, which I highly doubt, it's got a lot of good acidity, which is a lot of times lacking in a lot of Pinot Grigios that I've had.
Yeah, it's got that peachy kumquat-y thing happening.
I mean,
I like where you're headed.
Cat pee is the number one.
Oh, is that what you? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Sauvignon Blanc tell for me. And so I don't know that it's Sauvignon Blanc, but I'm pretty sure.
I don't understand your cat pee thing.
Somebody help me reframe it to think, maybe don't think about Sauvignon Blanc smelling like cat pee. Think about your cat pee smelling like Sauvignon Blanc.
Much nicer.
I like it that way.
That's my least favorite Sauvignon Blanc aromatic, and I tried to make my Sauvignon Blanc not smell like that, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll see.
No.
If this is my Sauvignon Blanc.
They're both very similar in color, which is a very light white wine.
When I first heard that we were taking on Patrick's wines and we tasted them, we were told that they're natural wines. You know, they are made with what's called minimal intervention. And when we tasted them, they were just so clean and pretty and delicious and not flawed. And that was really exciting. But I also think what's cool about Patrick's wines is he's kept them at a really accessible price point.
I love your label. I mean, not all
Just because your name's on it?
That's the number one reason why. And some of them they look a little bit different, but you have what looks like a chateau of sorts.
The labels on the Monte Rio wines tend to be based on old wine labels from all over the world. The main one you're talking about, it's my heritage varietal label. It's based on an old Charles Krug label from the 60s that I sent my designer. Back then, with Chateau Montelena and other ones that were like that, they had the picture of the winery or the chateau on it. I didn't have a winery or a chateau. In fact, at this point, I was living in a single wide trailer in Pax's property, which I almost put on the label. But the town of Monte Rio Cellars, Monte Rio, which I named my winery after, which I live right outside of, has a little movie theater on it. There used to be a Kwanzaa hut that in the 50s was this couple who lived there turned it into a movie theater. So it's all Art Deco facade. The only thing in town is that and a little dive bar.
What do you think wine number 2 might be?
Do I have to pick what it might be? Can't I just say what I taste?
Sure.
This had way more of, especially in comparison, like this is just like bursting with fruit, and then this I get a little bit more minerality, a little bit more barnyard. It started out with that like almost like a sake-ish element.
There's a real nice salinity.
You guys are on the same wavelength. Sake, like that melted snow.
Yeah.
Kind of I mean, I'm talking about my own wine. What the hell's wrong? It's delicious. I love it. Where do I buy it?
At Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions.
Shameless plug.
Some of your recent call to arms has also involved winemaking techniques.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we can talk about that a little bit about sulfur and how, you know, I wasn't using sulfur when I started my first 2 vintages. I was really hell-bent on this dogmatic idea of being 0-0 and no filtration and no anything. And, you know, the problem with natural wine, I definitely don't want to get into that conversation, but so I did start using more sulfur as time has gone on, and I'm not using a huge amount of sulfur, but I'm using the right amount of sulfur, and I can tell you that because the wine tastes better than they ever had.
Sulfur gets a bad rap. Some people believe that sulfites are what may make them feel one way or the other when they drink the wine.
I mean, if you knew the amount of sulfur that you consume on a normal day just based on the fact that it's in everything that we consume and produce here and in the world, not even just in the US, it wouldn't even be a conversation we need to have. But I use minimal amounts of sulfur, and it's more about using it in the right moments and using it in the right amounts.
There are so many other additives that could be causing the issues that you think you're having from sulfur. That's sort of the thing that's gotten the biggest media attention, but there's really so many other things, which is a reason that you want to shop at places like Dare, where they're very careful about the wines that they've chosen. They know their producers aren't doing that. Patrick is not putting wood chips and extra chemicals in his wine.
I think, the natural wine movement and the low sulfur movement came out of a good place, in this idea of like fight back of big wine that was adding a ton of different horrible things to it. The pendulum, like always in a movement, zealots and dogmatic people love a cause, and if you're not careful, you can let them take it away, and then we're all looking around like, how did we wind up following this cult leader to this place that we shouldn't be at?
I'm gonna drink this Kool-Aid. Does it have sulfur in it? No. Thank God. Oh yeah. Uh-oh. We want to vote on which wine we like. This is a really tough decision for me because there are things I love about both of them.
That's what makes it a good Thunderdome, right? When we have hard decisions.
Right. Okay, let's vote then.
Number 2. I'm surprised. I thought it was going to be number 1.
I thought so too. Chris, you're not gonna vote?
All the wines I sell are like my children.
Oh, come on. We're gonna make the winemaker himself vote on it.
Also, there's
diplomatic.
5 of us here. We may need a tiebreaker.
Okay. So honestly, I like the first one the best.
1 vote for 2. Mary Dare?
I'm for 2.
We're gonna let you vote last.
Yeah, no,
Winemaker Patrick Capiello.
I don't want to be a tiebreaker if I have.
I'll eat my words if number 2 is your Pinot Grigio, but wine number 2 that I like better.
I'm genuinely surprised that I like number 2 better.
If you had to vote right now,
I would vote for wine number 2, and especially because I know what it is, because I know how hard I work to make that wine.
I'm gonna say wine 1 is Sauvignon Blanc.
This is wine number 1. I know you're not going to believe this, but this is wine number 1.
Oh, wine number 1 is not Sauvignon Blanc. It is the Colombard, so I'm gonna be 100% incorrect, one way or the other.
And not only that,
Wine number 2.
is the Sauvignon Blanc.
Is the Sauvignon Blanc. What?
Nice.
Wow, so you did it exactly correct then.
Yeah.
You got all the cat pee out of the Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, I hate Sauvignon Blanc too. Jesus, my assistant winemaker, and I spend probably more time making Sauvignon Blanc than any of the other wines that we make, which is insane because, as I mentioned, I don't really like Sauvignon.
Not a fan.
But I figured if I was going to make something I hate, I was going to make it as best I could.
Well, your wines are delicious. I love that you've taken your knowledge of wine as a sommelier and applied it to the process of making wine. I love that you're taking a stand for the winemakers around where we live. I think that's important. I think it's great that you're educating people about some potential common mistakes about things like sulfur.
Should we mention that we're a fan of the Zinfandel?
Yes, we have had the Zinfandel before, and it's really good. I'm also a fan that you named the wine after me, so thank you.
Pleasure.
They're Monte Rio wines. They're available at places like Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions here
And the one,
in
especially
Lenox.
the one in Great Barrington, which is about to have a party.
Yeah, tell us about your party, Mary Dare.
Thanks. Yes, we're going to do our grand opening celebration on Saturday, May 4th. So we'll have a donut pop-up in the morning, an oyster pop-up throughout the afternoon, and we have a really big, great grape surprise to share with everybody.
And thank you, Chris, for not trying to trick me by picking Patrick's Pinot Grigio.
I'll get you one of these days.
And your little dog, too.
What a strong smell of sulfur.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too. What a smell of sulfur. We don't need another hero.
Thanks again to winemaker Patrick Capiello and Monte Rio Wines. Live Music Friday is next with East Hampton band True Jackie.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. True Jackie, formerly known as True Jacqueline, are Kate Dowd, Noah Dowd, and Brian DePippo.
This East Hampton band has been described as sometimes sludgy, sometimes poppy, loud sounds by introverts.
They are playing JJ's Tavern in Florence tomorrow, Saturday, April 27th. Welcome to Live Music Friday, True Jackie.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Can we hear a song?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Ready? True Jackie, who are playing at JJ's Tavern in Florence tomorrow night. Do you have anything to fully disclose about this band, Khalees?
Okay, so full disclosure, Kate, who sings lead and plays bass for this band, is in one of my other bands with me. She is in Extemper.
That's
Nice.
me.
Yes.
So your band was True Jacqueline, and now it's True Jackie. What is the story behind the name and then the name change?
It went through a lottery. We actually have like a list of maybe 1,000 different names.
Oh
for
my
things.
God! I've been in so many bands where I had like so many songs done, but we just could not agree on a name.
I just like collecting things that have weird mouth feel, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a good wine.
The True Jacqueline, it's like
True Jacqueline.
Not to be confused with the Hugh Jackmans.
Oh yeah.
Or the huge Jack Lanterns.
No.
Right. True Jacqueline. But now you're True Jackie.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody could spell it right.
No one could spell it.
Flyers.
That's all it is, really.
Tired of explaining.
The CQ. They couldn't handle it.
So I was aware of you before we were in a band together because I feel like True Jackie now, it's going to be hard for...
It's fine.
Everybody's adjusting. Has been a Valley staple, actually, in the music scene. And so... talk a little bit about like the change in personnel because you were larger and now you're a trio and you've been a trio for a while, but also there's been a little bit of change in your sound too, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started, it was a long time ago. There were 5 people in the band at one point, had a totally different sound, kind of more like twee pop. And then Brian joined the band on drums, and I think like between me and him, like having a little bit heavier of a musical influence, maybe, I guess. We kind of just,
Definitely.
over the years, it's just kind of gotten heavier and...
I always wanted to get weirder.
Yeah, heavier and weirder. Although now we're just like...
That's how I am. That's what happened to me personally.
Yeah, exactly. That's what time does to us all.
It's called middle age.
Yep.
You're heavier and weirder.
That's what time does to us all.
I know.
How dare you, Noah?
I mean, and now we're kind of in a phase where like, well, or at least for me, I'm like, maybe our songs shouldn't be so sad. Maybe we should write some happy songs. I don't know. How do you do that? Yeah.
Kind of coming out of our blue period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we run out of time, let's make sure we hear another song by True Jackie, who are playing at JJ's Tavern in Florence, this East Hampton-based band featuring Kate Dowd and Noah Dowd and Brian DePippo playing in Florence tomorrow night.
Yeah.
This song is called?
Oh, Fantasy Sweeps. Ready?
Yeah.
Jackie playing at JJ's in Florence tomorrow night.
And head to their Bandcamp page and pick up their last EP, which is pretty great. I just gotta say, I might be biased.
Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having us.
Next week on the Fabulous 413, U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren.
We're going to talk about a litany of issues, including Gaza and local aid and more. A history festival is coming up next week. We'll talk about that. Queer poetry, rising folk star Amethyst Kia.
And Looney Tunes at the Springfield Orchestra. So much stuff. We'll see you next week on the Fabulous 413.